If ever there was a prize for the most horrible way to learn of your significant other's affair, I would probably win it and be in its Hall of Fame. Like so many people in this sub, I suddenly found myself as a member of a club that nobody ever wants to be part of. I will never forget the sound of my ex-sister-in-law's voice as she kept saying, I'm sorry, over and over on the phone while I drove home from a week-long business trip. I was confused and had absolutely no idea what she meant, but only after I managed to calm her down somewhat did she inform me that my wife was in hospital and that I needed to hurry home. My mind went into overdrive as I tried to get more information as well as not crash while I began speeding to get there faster. The only thing she told me is that it was an assault, then cut the call and wouldn't answer when I tried to call her again. A bit of background. My ex and I met in our mid-20s, it was through a mutual friend at a barbecue. At first, she seemed almost too good to be true. Not only was she incredibly beautiful, but she was also shy and introverted. It took a while for us to officially date, but once it happened I was over the moon. When we first tried to get intimate she suddenly started crying. Should have taken this as a bad sign. I freaked out and thought it was something I did, but she apologized the next day and told me she was triggered. As it turns out, 2 years before meeting me she was in a long-term relationship with a guy that was abusive emotionally, physically, as well as mentally. He would degrade her during their moments of intimacy, then apologize afterward. She had a flashback but reassured me it had nothing to do with me, so we took things slow as she was still in therapy. It was tough, but because I loved her, I believed once we got over this it would make our relationship stronger, and for a while, it honestly appeared that way. Fast forward another year and we'd gotten engaged. First time intimacy also happened during this stage. I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a house for us courtesy of inheritance from my late uncle. Things were going great and I half-seriously suggested we plant a peach tree, important for later on, to signify new beginnings, and she was all for it. We were wedded not long after that, and quite frankly it was absolutely amazing. Of course, we had our normal ups and downs like every married couple, but I considered us luckier because she always made it a point to never go to bed upset with each other, and she would always point out gently if I did anything to upset her. Sometime later life basically happened and I was promoted at my job. It meant more pay, but it also meant I would be traveling more for work conferences and business meetings. I noticed she had been getting down a lot more and wasn't being as intimate as before. She would keep her phone close to her and even stop gently addressing things that upset her. I tried to talk to her about it, but she assured me that she was fine and this was a phase she was going through, and having no reason to not trust her I let it go. She would sometimes go to her sister's place and spend the night telling me she just needed a bit of girl time with her sister. The day I got that fateful phone call was the day she was meant to be keeping her sister company again. I remember rushing into the hospital barely breathing and frantically asking about my wife when the world's most understanding and patient police officer sat me down to explain what happened. He told me he was a friend of my sister-in-law and he happened to respond to a domestic disturbance call. He arrived on the scene to find a couple fighting. The supposed boyfriend was on top of the female punching her and she was screaming trying to scratch him. This didn't make any sense to me because 1. This had nothing to do with my wife because we're married. 2. Literally everyone who knew my wife knew she wouldn't do that. He gave me a knowing look and placed his hand on my shoulder, then told me to be very calm because said girlfriend was actually my wife. If it weren't for the severity of the situation I would have laughed in his face, but something in the way he said everything made me believe him. I then was ushered in by a nurse to see my wife, and what greeted me to this day I still can hardly find the words to describe it. I just stood there for what seemed like an eternity, then a doctor came in and explained her injuries to me. The jaw was slightly fractured, her left eye was completely swollen shut, and had massive bruising covering half of her face as well as 3 broken ribs. Then the doctor dropped another bomb and told me she was pregnant. I still couldn't understand how this happened. Then I caught sight of her sister. She at first tried to avoid me, but at the persuasion of her police officer friend, she told her what she knew. It turns out my wife's ex had gotten in contact with her 5 months ago. He was doing this redemption pyramid step thing where he would apologize to people he has wronged in order to clear his karma. Anyone else BS meter going crazy right now? They began talking more, then he convinced her to meet up for coffee and show her he was a changed man. Obviously old feelings resurfaced, coupled with the fact that he appeared changed, now it soon developed into an emotional affair. My wife approached her sister for advice, who told her to take things slow and just get it out of her system if she needed to. Which then led to a physical affair 3 months later. She actually told my wife that she should at least make peace with her ex in whatever form it may be, and even offered to cover for my wife once in a while. My sister-in-law was in tears at this point and kept apologizing to me, saying that she didn't know about the abuse, as my wife never told anyone other than me and her therapist at the time about it. I was numb. I just couldn't feel anything and was absolutely dumbfounded by my wife's actions. When my wife finally woke up, I was there and she burst into tears upon seeing me. I spent the following months in zombie flight mode. There was individual counseling for her as well as marriage counseling for us at the strong urging of her family. In counseling, she was surprisingly forthcoming about how it happened and how she absolutely hated herself for causing me pain. She mentioned how, at one point on her way home from his place, she actually fantasized about driving into the river because she smelt like him and didn't want his scent to corrupt me. However, that made sense. She said she then tried to end it but was too weak, and only after learning that she was pregnant, that it actually woke her up and made her realize that any further contact with this man was toxic, not only her but the unborn child as well. Hence went to end things in person for good when he snapped on her. She became a shell of herself and developed a phobia for any other males but me. At one point she couldn't even use the bathroom at night unless I was holding her hand. Sad. Right? After the baby was born, a son by the way, we got a paternity test and he was mine. But the more time I spent with her, the more I realized I didn't hate my wife. I actually loathed her. I couldn't see the woman I married but instead saw his leftovers each time I looked at her. I decided to leave because I was afraid I'd do something I'd regret and be exactly like her abusive ex. She begged me not to leave and even made the ridiculous offer of giving me a hall pass, as well as slapping her if I wanted to. I knew at this point I had to get out. She was actually very generous during the divorce. She moved back into her parents and signed a very well thought out co-parenting plan issued by the courts. Moving forward 3 years later, and I meet my now fiancé by chance. I was in a bookstore with a buddy of mine and we were discussing Egyptian mythology when this beautiful woman approached me to correct me on my pronunciations of the Egyptian gods and cities. Needless to say, immensely impressed by not only her understanding, but also by the fact that she is Egyptian herself. We exchanged numbers, which eventually led us to dating. When I finally proposed to her, it was actually in front of the peach tree I had planted years ago. I got down on one knee, but before I got my answer, she ran into the house, then came out with a ring as well. Turns out she was actually planning on proposing herself because she was madly in love with me and she just didn't want any other woman to have me. My son, in all his sweet childlike innocence, told his mother what happened because he was present when it happened. My ex literally showed up that night in the rain yelling about how could I propose to her, my fiancé, in front of our tree, and that this isn't the end of us. I am completely exhausted at this point. I cannot go no contact because she is the mother of my child, but she is basically harassing me and my fiancé. How do I convince her to move on, to get over her fear of men, and not force me to get a restraining order? Sorry it was long, but I am really desperate. Edit. Wanted to ask a question to the insightful women of Reddit. Something that still bugs me to this day is the fact that she even made time for her ex, who took pleasure in destroying her only for her to suffer a much worse fate. Is it normal for the abused to want the attention of the abuser even if she might hate him? Something my ex said once. Edit 2. Forgot to add this in the original post. When my fiancé presented me with the ring which she was going to use to propose to me, she had an engraving on the inner band which states, "To my Pharaoh." Damn, I love this woman. My 27 male ex, 27 female, of 5+ years wants to get back together after cheating on me. I should start out by saying that my ex-girlfriend / fiancé, Rachel, is one of the most caring and thoughtful people I have ever met. We started dating when we were 20 or 21 and had a lot of great time together. We have both helped each other get through difficult periods in our lives, and I will always appreciate everything she has done for me. Additionally, over the 5+ years that we dated, I became very close to her family, who are also a great bunch of people. I tried to keep this as short as possible, but it still ended up being way too long. I'm hoping that a timeline of the past year will help explain the situation a little better. January 2017. I had just proposed to Rachel after dating for 5+ years and living together for over 3 years. We both knew that we wanted to be married and spend our lives together. We planned on having the wedding in October 2017. July/August 2017. Rachel told me that she no longer wanted to get married in October. She was stressed out over the planning, and felt like we were rushing things and not getting exactly what we wanted. After we decided to postpone the wedding, Rachel said that she wanted to move out of our house and into her own apartment. She said that she wanted to leave on her own for a little bit to figure out how to be happy without relying on me and to prove to herself that she is capable of being independent. I was unhappy with this idea, but went along with it because I thought it wouldn't take her long to realize that she missed living with me. We both clearly agreed that we were still together and that we wouldn't see other people during this time. Also around this time, Rachel was also starting to spend a lot more time going out with a new group of friends from work. She works as a bartender/server and often works nights. I have a 9-to-5 type job. She began staying over at various friends' houses. I told her that this made me uncomfortable, but I trusted that she just needed a little space to figure things out on her own. September 2017. Rachel moved into her own apartment. We continued to date/hang out when our schedules allowed. I should also mention that we hadn't had sex since Rachel called off the wedding in July. Rachel often said that she wasn't in the mood and didn't have any sex drive. October 2017. Rachel and I went to a friend's wedding out of town for a weekend. The wedding activities took place on Thursday/Friday nights. We also planned on staying in the city for an additional night on Saturday. Thursday and Friday nights were great and it felt like things were going really well between us. Saturday is when things started getting weird again. I was frustrated Saturday night when I again tried to initiate sex, but she turned me down with the reason again that she just didn't want to. At this point, it had been over 3 months since we last had sex. For this and a few other small reasons, I became suspicious that Rachel was seeing someone else. After she fell asleep on Saturday, I went through her text messages and found out that she had been messaging one of her new friends and that they had been dating. There were also messages saying that they had been hooking. I waited until Sunday when we got back to Rachel's apartment to confront her. I first asked if she had been seeing someone else and she continued to deny it. She admitted to cheating once I showed her screenshots of the messages I had seen. At this point, I told her that our relationship was over and that I did not want anything else to do with her. After a couple weeks, I met up with Rachel and we discussed how our relationship had gotten to this point. We both agreed that there were issues in our relationship that had caused things to deteriorate. She also said that she had ended things with the other guy, that it was a huge mistake and that she only wanted to be with me. This same night was also the first night we slept together since July. In retrospect, probably not a great idea for me to sleep with her at this point. I thought at this point that we could work to try and fix our relationship and that given enough time I could build trust in her again. A week later we were hanging out and I again tried to initiate sex, but she didn't want to. She then told me that she still needed more time to figure things out on her own and how to make herself happy. She wanted to continue to be friends while figuring things out. December 2017. Becoming frustrated with waiting on Rachel to decide if she wanted to be more than friends and unsure if we could even work things out due to her cheating, I started hanging out with a few people that I met online through dating apps. Rachel found out that I was dating other people when she asked if she could come over one night, but I told her that I had plans and she couldn't come over. To clarify, I was hanging out with other people, but I was not sleeping with anyone. The furthest it went with any of the dates was making out. The next day Rachel asked me to come over so that we could talk. She was under the impression that we weren't seeing other people. When I got to her apartment, she told me that she was hurt that I was seeing other people and that she now knows what she wants. She wants to get back together. I told her I would think about it. Rachel also explained that she thought she was doing things over the past 2 months that indicated that we were more than friends, baking me cookies, helping with yard work at my house, etc. In the meantime, I have continued to hang out with one of the girls I met through the dating app. We have really hit it off and I could see things continuing to progress. Obviously, I can't compare my almost 6-year relationship with Rachel to someone who I've known less than a month, but it has made me realize that there are certain things about Rachel that are missing. As mentioned above, Rachel works in a restaurant and doesn't know what sort of career she would like to pursue. I always assumed that eventually, Rachel would figure out what she wants to do and that it wasn't a huge rush. Now that we are both almost 28, it worries me that she isn't making more of an effort to start a career. We are supposed to hang out tomorrow to discuss things. I thought it would be helpful to get some outsiders' viewpoints and opinions as well. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to my story.